At the story's beginning, a man has been looking for his missing son. He is distributing the flyers himself after receiving zero hope from the police department. But more than a year has passed, and there has been no progress. A police officer named Go Yoon is sad to see this man's poor condition, but she can't do anything for him. At night, that man is seen to be about to end his life on a bridge, but then he finds Rainbow Taxi's contact number at that bridge, where it is mentioned that he did not need to end his life, but talk to the taxi service about his problem. Sung Cheol gets a call from him and assigns Dogi to pick him up. Once in the taxi, the man narrates how he was a single man raising his son. He claims that he raised his son as a very nice person, despite the financial challenges. As the mother died at a very young age, the father was the only one to raise his son. Once the son, Dong-jae, grows into a full man, he realizes his father is in debt. So Dong-jae wanted to go to Vietnam on a study scholarship to gain opportunities for their future lives. The father was also willing to send away his son for 2 years after the young guy was selected as an exchange student in Vietnam. The man sends his son Dong-jae off happily, but 10 months later, when there is no contact from Dong-jae for 15 days straight, the man gets worried. He contacts Dong-jae's friends and learns that his son has paid off his debt. The young boy's friends claim that Dong-jae had been abroad for a job and not to study. The man is pissed off when he learns about his son's sacrifice and flies to Vietnam to find him. There he learns that the company mentioned in Dong-jae's contract documents was a sham. Just then, he receives a call from an unknown number. The father recognizes the voices as his own son, but the call disconnects before he can say anything. Then, Dong-jae's father files a complaint about his son being missing, but the cops assume that Dong-jae has fled because he is an adult now and wants an independent life. The chief of that police department tells him that Dong-jae had called the Vietnam embassy and asked them to tell his father to stop contacting him as he doesn't want to come back home. But the father doesn't believe that his son could say anything like this. That's why the man has now made it his life's mission to find Dong-jae. He prints a lot of brochures to find his son and starts distributing them all over the city. After some days, he finds an employment letter from Dong-jae asking him to back off from looking for him as he had made a life for himself abroad. The writing of that letter also matches the writing of Dong-jae. The cops tell him that the number that Dong-jae called from was a place famous for its casinos, and add that maybe he also had turned into a gambler. Back in the present, Sung Cheol and Dogi analyze the letter and find a cryptic Morse code message indented at the bottom of the letter. Dogi states that Dong-jae served as an operations leader during his mandatory enlistment. A flashback shows Dong-jae being beaten up by a few men who make him write a letter to his dad. In the Rainbow Taxi headquarters, Dogi decodes the SOS message from Dong-jae and finds out that Dong-jae wants help. On the other hand, the man presses the blue button on the video message from Rainbow Taxi to start the mission to save his son. Soon after, Dogi takes his taxi and drives it out of the basement to start the mission. With only 2 out of its 5 members working the job, Rainbow Taxi seems to be facing some technical glitches. At first, Dogi learns that the office in Vietnam is actually an under-construction building in South Korea. Then he finds that the company has changed to a new name, now and again needs new employees for it. So Dogi applies for the same overseas job as Dong-jae. With just him and Sung Cheol, it seems that the mission will be a lot more difficult than they anticipated. Sung Cheol chickens out and wants them to think about a better plan of action for this mission, but Dogi takes the flight regardless. The next day, the previous member of the Rainbow Taxi, Kyung-gu and Jin-yeon, are united again. Ji-yeon is going to Russia for 5 years for a job, and he wants to meet Sung Cheol for once. Though they both tried to meet Sung Cheol earlier, Sung Cheol reprimanded them and asked them not to come again there. Still, they arrive at Rainbow Taxi to meet Sung Cheol, but are surprised to see that it is closed. They wait in Sung Cheol's cabin only to find Dong-jae's missing poster. They quickly understand that Rainbow Taxi is back in service, so they rush to the secret basement. At first, Sung Cheol becomes happy by seeing them, but then he kicks them out because he doesn't want to put them in danger. They take Dong-jae's flyer with them and think that Dogi must have been on a mission, so they take the flyer to Go Yoon. But Go Yoon is busy with her job, so she doesn't pay much attention to them. Back in Vietnam, Dogi is received by a driver from the company who drives him to a remote location. Sung Cheol tries his best to screen the number plates for the vehicles as Dogi sends him images of his spectacles from the camera. A representative from the company where Dogi is going takes the mobile phones of all the candidates and takes them on a ship to an island. Then, they are transported in a pickup truck to an unknown location, and their faces are covered with black clothes. Later, we see Dogi tied upside down to a hook and beaten up alongside two other men who applied for the position. The leader of the group tells them that their job would be to make online games as computer engineers. With these games, the men plan on extorting money from young players. The man sends Dogi and the other two recruits to study how these games are made, and Dogi finds many other young boys in the isolated rooms. They look like more of a prison cell, where newly kidnapped people are locked and forced to work. Back in the headquarters, Sung-cheol is helpless at Go-eun's desk, as he can't do the technical work that Go-eun used to do. So he is thinking about calling her. But she calls him instead and learns that Rainbow Taxi is indeed back in business. Meanwhile, Kyung-gu and Ji-eon try to get the police to help in the matter of Dong-jae's father finding his son. But the police behave very rudely with them. Ji-eon sneakily takes photos of the police records on Dong-jae's case, while Kyung-gu creates a scene to distract the cops. At the same time, Dogi is put into a room and thinks of ways to escape. He sees the book of programming in which Dong-jae wrote that he wanted to go back home. In the meantime, one of the new recruits runs away from the gangsters, but the man ends up finding a Korean restaurant that is far from the location where they were kept. He meets the restaurant owner there and asks them to call the embassy. But as it turns out, the hotel owner is in on the scam and hands the recruit over to the gang leader, Sang Man. Sung-cheol is in a fix trying to get the computers to work when he accidentally presses a button, which causes a short circuit, just as Go-eun rushes to help out. Kyung-gu and Ji-eon are on their way to Vietnam to help Dogi, while Go-eun works with Sung-cheol to get in touch with him. Dogi manages to sneak out of his room and finds his spectacles in the room where the gangsters are seated. As Dogi takes a look around the place, the gangsters punish the new recruit for trying to flee away. In the meantime, Dogi tries to connect with Sung-cheol, but is shocked to hear Go-eun from the other end. The lady wants to know if Dogi is really okay or not, so our man flips the spectacles on himself to show that he is really okay. They chat about the case. He tells Go-eun that the gangsters are trying to create illegal games in order to scam money out of people. Sung-cheol worries this would be dangerous and asks Go-eun to return, but Dogi is determined to find Dong-jae alive. He is going to stay there and complete the mission at all costs. Meanwhile, Kyung-gu and Ji-eon make it to Vietnam, but are shocked when they see that Bok-ja is in the same city. They have a history with that old lady and are very scared of her. So the two men ran away without their luggage, worried that Bok-ja would recognize them. The next morning, Dogi manages to charm the gangsters after showing off the amazing online game he designed overnight. The gangsters show the game to their boss, and the man seems impressed. Meanwhile, Dogi shares images of the gangsters with his team back home, and Go-eun runs them through her database to find out who the main gangster is. Just then, the game suddenly crashes, and Dogi blames the gangsters for the crash, causing chaos and infuriating the men. In their anger, the gangsters are going to cut off one recruit's leg in order to make an example out of him for running away, but Dogi manages to help save the man. Dogi manages to impress the main boss and convinces him to refrain from cutting the recruit's leg off. Once they return to the room to make the online game, Dogi promises the recruits that he will ensure they safely return home. Meanwhile, Kyung-gu and Ji-eon are trying to make a plan to help Dogi. They have reached the island where Dogi is being kept. Back in the prison cells while the other two recruits are busy working, Dogi is snooping around. In the meantime, the main gangster, Sang Man, tries to sort out the game that Dogi made and uses Dogi's flash drive on his own device, giving Go-eun full access to his system. She begins a data sweep while Dogi sneaks out of the abandoned building where the recruits were held and arrives in the main city in a taxi. He beats up the taxi drivers when they try to loot him and takes the taxi away. Then Dogi picks up the guide in his taxi. He is the same person who picked Dogi from the airport and handed him over to the gangsters. He still was holding on to the passports of the other recruits. He calls up the Korean embassy and cooks up a lie about the men fleeing from their Korean families due to domestic abuse. Dogi drives the guide to a remote location and ties him up to the front of the car. He threatens to kill him in order to get more information on Lee Dong-jae. In this way, Dogi manages to get information on Dong-jae. Then he comes across Kyung-gu and Ji-eon, who are wandering on foot on the abandoned road. He takes the two into his taxi and drives them to the city for a meal. There, the duo tells him that they saw Bok-ja in the city. So Dogi hatches a plan to woo her and use her as a ploy. Dogi disguises himself as a wealthy show-off person and manages to catch Bok-ja's eye. Seeing him, Bok-ja runs after Dogi, carrying a butcher knife in her hands. But Dogi slips an address to a young man and flees from the location. On his way back, Dogi attacks the restaurant owner, who had informed the gangsters about the recruit fleeing. The next morning, the gangsters are forced to take all the recruits away to another location, when Bokja and her men arrive at the abandoned factory in search of Dogi because he has given them the address of that location. Before Bokja could find Dogi, he went to the other location, and the old lady yelled to catch him, but in vain. Sangman takes the men to their location, where their head boss keeps all the other recruits. Dogi wanted this because the guide had informed him that Dongjai was kept in this location with other recruits. Tens of other Korean recruits are together at that location. The head boss is angry at Sangman for bringing all the recruits there because it could expose their illegal business. There, Dogi sends Go-an a picture of the head boss. She runs a search for it and learns that he is the captain detective who was in charge of Dongjai's case in South Korea. After that, Sangman makes the man write dying notes to their families, as they had forced Dongjai earlier to write such a letter. In the meantime, Dongjai is brought to the same location and is in terrible condition. Seeing all this, Dogi gets irritated and decides to fight the gangsters and manages to tackle them all one by one. Then he frees the recruits and asks them to flee from that location. Dogi goes outside and fights off all the other gangsters before running after the head boss. Kyung-gu and Ji-yeon arrive just in time, dressed as Vietnamese cops, and give a motorbike to Dogi, allowing him to run after the head boss, who is taking all the money with him on the instructions from someone on his phone call. A chase lands both Dogi and the head boss in a remote location, where Dogi confronts the head boss by crashing his motorbike into the captain detective's car. Then Dogi asks him about abducting innocent men despite being a cop. However, the cop has a gun and threatens to kill Dogi, but a gunshot comes out of nowhere, killing the head boss there instead of Dogi. Dogi wonders who the person who helped him is as cops arrive at the crime scene. After some time, all the gangsters are arrested, and the recruits are freed from the long tyranny of the cruel people. Back in South Korea, Dogi drops Dongjai off to meet his father and complete the mission. Dogi watches the father reunite with his son and drive off, taking the taxi out of service. Go-eun resigns from her job as a cop, and the Deluxe taxi service is back in business with all 5 employees. That night, we see a new employee make his way to Sung Cheol's cabin. After some days in the taxi, Dogi gets a call from Sung Cheol, who is going to Vietnam to investigate the murder of the head boss, Captain Detective. After inspecting the crime scene and discussing the matter with a local detective, Sung Cheol tells Dogi that the shell casing of the bullet was made in Korea, which meant the person who saved Dogi was Korean too. Or it could be possible that the killer wanted to clear all the leads, which could have made Dogi reach the mastermind of that illegal business. So the identity of Dogi is now under threat. Meanwhile, we see an old woman is about to take her own life on the railway lines, but she stops when she finds the contact number for Rainbow Deluxe Taxi's revenge services there at a rail line. The team gets a call, and Sung Cheol sends Dogi to pick up the woman from the train station. The woman narrates her story to Dogi and reveals how a young man who was a singer by profession had scammed the old woman. After holding a singing show in her small village, the con man Sangi learned from other old women that Mrs. Lee Im-soon was suffering financially and that her son lives in the city. So Mrs. Lee Im-soon was an easy target for him in that village. He used the information to get close to Mrs. Lee by announcing her name as the winner of the gifts in his singing show. He also used to go to Mrs. Lee Im-soon's home and spend time with her. After he had won her favor by revealing that he had a sick 5-year-old son at home, Sangi lures Mrs. Lee into selling his fake item to the villagers. He took all that money and also made the old lady apply for a credit card. He convinces the woman to look after his pop-up shop, where elders from the village end up buying broken electronics. However, since Mrs. Lee was at the store, the villagers pinned the blame on the old woman. Sangi left his remaining stock at the house of the old lady and fled from the village, making Mrs. Lee Im-soon the target of all the frauds. Also, cops learned that the electronics were purchased from a credit card registered under Mrs. Lee's name too. She begs the cops not to call her son, who is already suffering financially. In the meantime, Sangi calls Mrs. Lee to rub salt in the wound, stating she should ask her son to help repay her debt. Mrs. Lee Im-soon had nothing to do in that situation, so she decided to take her own life to get rid of all of that fuss. Back to the present, the taxi driver group hatches a plan to help Mrs. Lee because they know how the elderly are easy prey for such scammers. Meanwhile, Mrs. Lee accepts the conditions of Rainbow Taxi and decides to take revenge by pressing the blue button. When they start the investigation, the team finds Sangi and his men buying more faulty electronics for their next target. This time, Kyunggu and Jiyeon have settled with the villagers of this new town that Sanggi is attacking. Sanggi sets up a singing show in the village, while Kyunggu and Jiyeon record evidence from that gathering. Sanggi and his team have an old man as their target this time. They end up convincing an elderly man named Mr. Lee. Go-yoon tells Dogi that Sanggi and his men had used the old man's identity card to purchase phone numbers and had maxed out the bills to all 6 cards registered under Mr. Lee's name. After that, Dogi pays Sanggi's men a visit, and he comes across a goon who is working with Sanggi. There, Dogi successfully beats the 5 men up all by himself and uses a flash drive to give Go-yoon access to all of their documents. Go-yoon manages to cancel all the subscriptions in the name of those old people. Meanwhile, Dogi destroys all the confidential data collected by Sanggi and his men. On the other hand, Sanggi is unaware of this and tries to reach his men, but is unable to get through to them. After some time, Sanggi and his men are driving to the village when their truck breaks down in the middle of the street. Just as the 3 men fight, Dogi appears there disguised as a villager in a tractor and offers to give Sanggi and his men a lift into the village. But Sanggi and the men just want to get their truck repaired. So Dogi directs them to a local repair shop and leaves in his tractor. Sanggi and his men drag their truck to the local repair shop, which surprisingly belongs to Dogi. They instantly start rebuking Dogi for not towing their truck to his shop, and Dogi's attitude infuriates Sanggi further. One of the men with Sanggi requests Dogi to repair their truck, and he agrees. Dogi gets it done in time for the afternoon show. However, after the Rainbow Deluxe Taxi Gang's intervention, Mr. Lee does not win the prize as per Sanggi's plan. The winner turns out to be Jiyeon. Sanggi and his men try a second time with another elderly woman, but Go-yoon manages to alert the group, and Kyunggu wins the second raffle. Sanggi and his men are upset that their plan did not materialize, and he yells at his men. Later, Sanggi tries to cheat Mr. Lee a second time by selling him a product. The old man hands over his credit card to Sanggi to make a transaction, but Dogi appears there on time. He has a transmitter with him that blocks the transaction from being made. Despite multiple efforts from Sanggi, the transaction was not successful because Dogi continuously kept the transmitter near the car machine. Then, Dogi manages to break Sanggi's card machine and immediately leaves from there. The following day, Sanggi and his men host a meal for the elderly in the village. There they spot a new target, an old woman. Sung Cheol, Go-yoon, and Dogi make a plan to get the attention of the con team. One day, Sanggi's truck surprisingly breaks down yet again, and Dogi is back in the right place. He offers the 3 men a ride to the village and also tows their truck this time. However, they run into Sung Cheol, who is disguised as an elderly man. Sung Cheol flashes a $100 bill, and Sanggi learns that the man must be rich. He and his men see that Sung Cheol is wearing designer slippers, and so they decide to make him their next target. They later arrive at Sung Cheol's house and find a Porsche in his backyard. Not only that, but the men are shocked to see many expensive items just lying around in the old man's hut. The men hide when they hear Sung Cheol approaching. They see the old man with stacks of cash and learn that he is CEO Baek Sung-mi. Sanggi looks up Sung Cheol's new identity, Sung-mi, online, and is shocked to learn that the old man was a big catch of his time with a lot of money. Kyunggu and Jiyeon are watching Sanggi from the camera Dogi installed in the truck. The next day, Sanggi tries to talk to Sung Cheol and invites him to his singing show. Sung Cheol shows up, and Sanggi is extremely chummy with the old man, which causes him to walk out. Sanggi's men tell him that they were not able to find the precious items he had asked them to search for in Sung-mi's house. They tell him that the precious items may be hidden on the old man's farm, as Sung Cheol often goes to the farm with his stack of money. The trio decides to follow him around the next day, and Dogi watches the bees fall into the trap. At the same time, Kyunggu and Jiyeon look around the apartment the trio were renting, but they were not able to find anything on Sanggi there. Also, Sanggi needs more intel about Sung Cheol, which is why he arrives at Dogi's repair shop to service his truck. He starts asking Dogi questions about the old man and asks if Sung Cheol has any land in the village. Dogi directs Sanggi to a presumably lucrative location, and the con man thinks he's hit the jackpot. Sanggi and his men dig up the entire ground, but are tired and cannot find anything. They end up digging the last hole and still find nothing. Sanggi is furious and reprimands Dogi for giving him false information. Dogi further lies and tells Sanggi that he used to lend his tractor to Sung Cheol in the past. He bribes Dogi for it, and Dogi takes his tractor to the farms of the old man, according to Sanggi's instructions. After Dogi has left, Sanggi and his men use the tractor to dig Sung-mi's land and find a box hidden underground. Sang-mi opens the box and, to his bad luck, finds poop inside. They are furious and are trying to take the tractor away, but the vehicle breaks down, blackening the face of Sang-gi. After that, Sang-gi's men spot Sung Cheol taking another box into the field. The trio decides to help the old man with dinner that night. They have now started following Sung Cheol around everywhere. When Sung Cheol gets exhausted from the con men, the taxi group now plans a singing show with Go Won as the main lead. At the show, Sang-gi sees Sung Cheol enjoying himself and offering a $100 note to Go Won. He asks Go Won to make the old man talk about his hidden treasure. After some time, Sang-gi and his men are shocked to see Go Won drive away in Sung Cheol's Porsche. She tells them that the old man gave away his car to her and adds that she knows the location of his hidden treasure because she is pretty. She drives off, but the men follow her in their truck. Doogie appears on his tractor and blocks them from following Go Yoon's car. The men leave their truck behind and eventually catch up to Go Yoon's car on their foot but find it empty. When they see back, they also lose their truck as it falls off a cliff and bursts into flames. A flashback shows that Doogie had learned that the men had a large sum of cash and gold biscuits hidden in the truck. Doogie had caused the truck's handbrake to malfunction, and that's why the truck fell off the cliff. Sang-gi breaks down into tears, watching his truck burn into flames. Later, in his anger, Sang-gi sets out to follow Sung Cheol and threatens to kill him if he still doesn't reveal the location of his treasure. Sung Cheol decides to run from the men and jumps off a cliff into the ocean. Seeing this, Sang-gi goes out of his mind and assumes that the old man has directed them to the hidden treasure, as he now has the map from the Porsche that the old man gave to Go Won. Sang's own men are now scared of him and run off for their lives. In the meantime, Kyung-gu and Jin-yeon, on a boat, save Sung Cheol from the ocean. Doogie drives Sang-gi's men and ties them up at a shore. Meanwhile, Sang-gi is still following the treasure and is going crazy. Doogie and the group decide to leave him treasure hunting. Doogie thinks that it is punishment enough for the con man after he loses his wealth, his friends, and his senses in search of a treasure. Sang-gi digs holes under all the red flags to find the treasure, but accidentally steps on a landmine that is placed by Doogie there. Back in the village, the taxi group returns all the money to the elderly who were conned, and Mrs. Lee is happy to be reunited with her family. Meanwhile, Ha-jun is suspicious of the Rainbow Taxi Company and tries to find out the secrets of Sung Cheol's cabin. But Sung Cheol comes there and makes Ha-jun go back. But at night, when no one was present at the headquarters, Ha-jun again tried to go to the secret underground office using the keys. But the lift malfunctioned, and he could not reach the secret place of the taxi group. Later, someone is seen taking photos of Sung Cheol, Kyung-gu, Jin-yeon, and Go Won. The man says that he found him as he snaps a photo of Doogie, and he matches the photo with the one on his application papers from Vietnam. After some days, when Doogie is on the rooftop of his house, Ha-jun comes there. He had moved into the same apartment complex as Doogie. The following day, when Go Won is at work, she notices someone taking photos of her. But Ha-jun comes there to distract her, and the car with the photographer moves away. The new employee asks questions about the secret basement, but Go Won doesn't tell him anything. Go Won goes house hunting with Doogie, and Ha-jun comes along with them. While looking at the apartment, Ha-jun ends up talking to the agent, and Doogie wonders if Go Won would like to move in at the old headquarters, which is now empty. On their drive back, Go Won asks how Ha-jun knew so much about house hunting. The young man claims that he moved out when he was very young and had experience of shifting to different houses as a teenager. There is an awkward silence, but Go Won changes the topic, asking to swap places with Ha-jun. The two argue in the cab while Doogie drives. The taxi stops all of a sudden when a young girl tries to cross the street and comes in front of the car. Doogie is shocked and Go Won runs out to check on the girl, but the young child runs away. Doogie finds her hiding behind a wall and apologizes for scaring the girl. The girl, Hwang Seo-yeon, says she wants to go to someone named So-mang. Doogie takes her to Rainbow Deluxe Taxi. There, the group is discussing how to send the young girl back to her guardians. Sung Cheol talks to Seo-yeon and reassures her, asking for her family members' contact information, but the girl doesn't know about her family. Jin-yeon and Kyung-gu play different tricks to try to get Seo-yeon to smile, but she is traumatized and doesn't smile even a bit. Then Go Won brings her something to eat. Suddenly, Seo-yeon gets scared when she hears a bell ring from the door opening. Outside, Doogie tells Sung Cheol that the girl has lost her younger sister, So-mang, and now she wants to get back to her. He also mentions that Seo-yeon was afraid of the police. She is hiding under a desk when Sung Cheol goes out to check on her. She reveals that her parents do not know that So-mang exists, but she wants to meet her little sister. Seo-yeon also mentions that she is scared of a man she is calling uncle. Do-gi goes out to check on Seo-yeon's house, where he overhears her mother talking to two men about the little girl's disappearance. Do-gi asks Go-eun to send him a picture of Seo-yeon's side profile. He shows the picture of Seo-yeon to the parents, but they don't recognize her. Do-gi thinks that Seo-yeon was kidnapped and the couple were forced to report her missing, claiming to be Seo-yeon's parents. On his way back, Do-gi arrives at a consultation talk for newlyweds by a famous real estate agent, Mr. Kang Pil-sung. Meanwhile, Sung-chul lies to the cops and tells them that the kid is not Seo-yeon, but another child who was safely reunited with her parents. After that, the group is seen discussing their next step in the case. Right then, the taxi driver who was keeping an eye on the kid called Sung-chul to inform him that Seo-yeon had gone missing again. Everyone looks around, but Do-gi goes back to the old secret headquarters. He finds Seo-yeon in the taxi, where the young girl asks Do-gi for help finding her little sister. She even pays Do-gi in coins in return for his help. Do-gi gets emotional and puts the taxi in service again. He starts investigating a new case without knowing anything about the background of the revenge. The following day, Do-gi goes back to real estate agent Pil-sung's office, Field Consulting, while Go-eun searches for the consultant online. She learns that he is a famous real estate agent and tells Do-gi that the man is super rich. Then Do-gi attends the talk there and sees that the consultant has a reputation, but also sees how he was very proud and hated commoners. Do-gi also learns that these talks were very exclusive, and only married couples with golden tickets were invited to the talk. Once Do-gi is back, Go-eun tells him that Seo-yeon was adopted. Do-gi finds a picture of Seo-yeon and So-mang with Pil-sung in one of his magazines and claims that two different couples had adopted the girls in order to successfully rent out an apartment in the city. So, when they make a plan, Do-gi shocks Go-eun and asks her to marry him. After some time, Go-eun and Do-gi get a makeover for the mission. The duo pretends to be a couple and talk to Pil-sung's men about the special talk. They get the golden ticket to the talk and attend the exclusive event as a couple. The talk begins with Pil-sung telling the audience how the properties were sold for millions of dollars, with no way for young couples to afford them with their little pay. Pil-sung states that only children of rich kids can afford such apartments. The entire room is silent, and then Pil-sung states that he will reveal the secret of buying apartments for young couples in his private consultation. So now Do-gi and Go-eun are waiting in line for their turn to chat with Pil-sung. Meanwhile, Sung-chul takes Seo-yeon to an amusement park and manages to get the child to smile as she enjoys herself. Meanwhile, at Do-gi and Go-eun's private consultation, Do-gi asks Pil-sung about his photograph with Seo-yeon and So-mang, but Pil-sung doesn't give any answer. He is suspicious of the couple and their documents, so he denied helping them in getting the house, saying that they had enough money to buy a house without his help. Go-eun and Do-gi leave the office disheartened, but our man has a plan. In the night, Go-eun manages to turn off the power at Field Consulting, which allows Do-gi to get inside the firm. Then Do-gi gives Go-eun access to the software there, while he looks at the other application forms. There, he learns that Pil-sung was looking for couples who were very poor. So Do-gi decided to have a do-over with their application for the new house scheme. He set off the fire alarm and destroyed the recent application forms that hadn't been uploaded to the server yet. The next morning, Pil-sung is upset that the new application forms were ruined. Now they would have to conduct the interviews again. For their next meeting with Pil-sung, Do-gi and Go-eun claim that they lost a lot of their money after investing in cryptocurrency. This manages to get Pil-sung interested in their application. The couple tells Pil-sung that they are very desperate to find an apartment. They added that they were willing to do anything for the apartment with no questions asked. Now Pil-sung seems to be happy with that response. After that, Do-gi and Go-eun are driving back home when Pil-sung gives them a call, stating he will be at their house for an inspection within some time. This makes our couple worried because they have not arranged anything yet to show Pil-sung. So Do-gi calls his other two team members to go and decorate the house. Kyung-gu and Jin-yeon rush to decorate Sung-chul's house to suit the newlyweds. When Pil-sung comes there, Do-gi claims that the couple was a paying guest at the shared house, so it can be a little clumsy inside. Outside the house, one of Pil-sung's men spots Seo-yeon, but she runs and hides behind a taxi. The man is about to catch her, but Sung-chul, Kyung-gu, and Jin-yeon arrive just in time to send him away. Meanwhile, the apartment is extremely well decorated for the newlyweds, Do-gi and Go-eun. It can also be said that the apartment was overly decorated, which made Pil-sung able to catch them in their lie. So he asks if Do-gi and Go-eun are really married. By this question, Go-eun and Do-gi's fake marriage is exposed in front of Kang Pil-sung. The real estate consultant decides to back out of the consultation when he learns that the couple is faking their relationship. However, Dogi decides to show his desperation by dropping to his knees and telling Pil-sung that he and Go-won were co-workers and would go to any length to get an apartment. Seeing this, Pil-sung agrees to work with them because they are very desperate, and he also needs such people. Pil-sung takes Dogi and Go-yeon to see an apartment they could potentially buy. Dogi and Go-yeon are excited, but they are suddenly shocked when Pil-sung mentions that Go-yeon is pregnant and should take care of herself. He asks them to act like they are expecting a baby soon. At the Rainbow Taxi headquarters, Sung-chol spends some time chatting with Seo-yeon as she draws on a notebook. He then shows the drawing to the group. From the drawing, Dogi speculates that Seo-yeon had been watching the kids play on the swings from a confined place. A flashback scene shows how Pil-sung and his men had kept many young children in an abandoned house in order to use them as adopted children for young couples who were trying to get a bank loan. The kids were treated like animals there and were left to starve for food in very poor living conditions. The group came to the conclusion that said children were probably orphans, which made the paperwork pretty easy for bad people. Just then, Pil-sung calls Dogi and schedules a meeting with the couple. At night, Go-yeon and Dogi meet Pil-sung at a maternity hospital where he tells the couple that they have to register a newborn under their name. The consultant states that a woman was about to give birth and the couple had to register her child under their name. Then the child would be taken away from them when it would be older a bit. Hearing all this, Go-ahun and Dogi are visibly upset. Pil-sung leaves the two alone to deal with the pregnant mother who has changed her mind about giving up her child. So Pil-sung beats her up and claims that he is helping her by taking off the burden from her shoulders as an unwed young woman. Dogi is watching this cruelty and he rings an alarm before Pil-sung can further harm the woman. One of his men tells Pil-sung that the woman has run away and they rush after her. As she runs, Pil-sung's man finds her and follows her in his car. He is about to run her over when Dogi intervenes in his taxi. He chases after his car, causing a distraction and allowing the woman to flee from there. After that, he beats the man while Go-yeon goes off to find the woman. Together, they take the woman to a home for single mothers. Back at the office, the group discusses possible ways to find the kids. Dogi claims that Pil-sung has a number of properties registered under his name and asks Go-yeon to find the one that has the least monetary value. He claims that the mentioned property could be a clue to finding the kids. Go-yeon finds it to be a photo studio, and Dogi investigates it. He finds family portraits of Seo-yeon with 4 different sets of parents and learns that Pil-sung had taken advantage of helpless people. He uses the kid to be the child of young couples in order to get them their apartments. After that, they make the child run away from the house and repeat the whole plan again with new parents. The next morning, Dogi, with Jin-yeon and Kyung-goo's help, beats Pil-sung's men, who had come for the photo shoot of another child. Then he takes the child, who is actually So-mang, with him. Later, Pil-sung is in his office, and a couple creates a mess, claiming that they are being exploited after they did as Pil-sung asked them to do. Pil-sung claims that he was only asking for money for his consultation, and the couple was desperate enough to sign the birth of a child under their name without thinking about the consequences. Right then, Pil-sung watches CCTV footage from the photo studio and sees how Dogi beat up his men. Just as Dogi arrives at the abandoned house where Pil-sung had kept the children, he learns that the consultant had left it open as bait, and the kids were all taken out of the property. Pil-sung wants to burn down the property with Dogi inside, and he assumes that the taxi driver is seeking revenge for his own child. So Pil-sung burns down the house and takes all the kids away in a van. In the meantime, Go-an reaches there with the team, and she is worried about Dogi, but he asks her, Kyung-goo, and Jin-yeon to follow Pil-sung's van and rescue the kids. Dogi tries to break out of the house, but the fire spreads fast. Just as he is about to escape, he hears a child crying. So Dogi goes upstairs and grabs the child. Then he jumps from the first-floor window of the house before the house blows up into flames. In the meantime, Go-an and her team chase after Pil-sung, who is in the van assaulting the kids who are being transported inside suitcases. Right then, Sung-cheol, who is at the hospital with Seo-yeon, tells Dogi that the bump on Seo-yeon's head was from constant assault, which further infuriates the driver. Meanwhile, the other 3 members of the group follow Pil-sung's van inside Field Consultant's head office. They notice that the kids aren't with Pil-sung and go to look for them. On the other hand, Pil-sung takes away his money and other important documents to flee, but Dogi arrives in time to beat him up. Dogi is filled with rage and chokes the consultant, asking where he hid the kids. Meanwhile, the trio tries to find the kids around the entire office building, but they are not able to find them anywhere. Pil-sung threatens to kill the kids if Dogi kills him, so the driver loosens his grip on his neck. Pil-sung charges Dogi and claims that he would let the kids go if Dogi dies at his hands. At that time, Go-eun is running around the parking lot looking for the kids when she hears a cry from one of the large vans. She tells Dogi that they found the kids. Hearing this, Dogi gets back at Pil-sung, beating him again. He ties up Pil-sung and puts him in a suitcase before dropping him off in a dumping yard. The consultant tries to break a deal with Dogi in exchange for his freedom, but the driver mentions that all of his property seals are no longer in his possession. Dogi asks if Pil-sung is guilty of his actions, but the man truthfully responds, stating he has no guilt. Dogi stuffs his mouth with his golden ticket and leaves Pil-sung to rot in the garage. As they drive off, Go-eun asks Dogi to close the case and asks him if they should get a fake divorce. The driver laughs and agrees as they drive back to the Rainbow taxi stand. At the headquarters, Ha-jun is seen starting his shift, but instead of taking passengers, he drives off to another location. He asks his subordinates to go on his job as a taxi driver. Here it is revealed that Ha-jun is actually after the revenge crew and is working as a spy there. At his huge mansion, Ha-jun, he meets with an investor who has just had a beverage. The guy intended to seal some of his investment papers for a hotel Ha-jun had invested in. The man jokes that Ha-jun was dumb enough to make the payment before receiving the sealed contract. However, Ha-jun smirked as the man choked, claiming that he would have the best benefits now that he became the sole investor in the hotel. The man dies at Ha-jun's feet due to the poison he mixed in the beverage. But he moves to a different room without looking back. In that room, Ha-jun looks at his evidence board on which he has collected background information on the secret Rainbow taxi revenge crew. The following day, Sung-chul donated all the money from the case to children's welfare and visited Seo-yeon and Somong at their new adoptive house, bearing gifts. Dogi goes out on a personal mission to beat up Seo-yeon's parents for beating her when she was in their custody. In the meantime, Pil-sung is adjusting to his new life as a beggar when Ha-jun pays him a visit, asking about what Dogi has done to him. The following day, Sang-chul discusses the shocking self-harm act of Pil-sung with Dogi. Dogi is sure that the man hadn't committed the unthinkable, but someone was onto them and had staged Pil-sung's death to get the revenge crew's attention. Dogi worries that the person who is looking for them must be closer than expected. The scene shifts to a young woman named Jin-hee, who is creating a scene outside a religious center. She claims that her sister, Jin Seon, was kidnapped by the religious leader, OK Juman, and is present inside the center at the moment. Juman claims that Jin Seon had made a personal decision when she chose to follow the Sunbaek Church, and that Jin-hee was trespassing on his private property. So Jin-hee is being taken away by the cops when she sees the contact number for Rainbow Taxi under the police mobile. After some time, the Rainbow Taxi comes there to pick up Jin-hee. She tells her story to Dogi and narrates how her older sister, Jin Seon, had been her only family member. After struggling for years to raise her, Jin-hee was finally a college graduate and worked a full-time job, thanks to Jin Seon's hard work. One day, Jin-hee notices that Jin Seon is having a nosebleed. Upon visiting a local hospital, the sisters learn that Jin Seon has a chronic illness called myeloid leukemia and needs to be treated as soon as possible if she wants to survive. Jin Seon is hopeless about her illness, but Jin-hee claims that she will help her sister and nurse Jin Seon back to health. At the hospital, a stranger talks to Jin Seon as she is crying alone. Following that interaction, Jin-hee notices that her sister had started following a new religion, where she heard absurd sermons from a religious leader, Juman. Jin-hee tries to force her sister to take her treatments, but Jin Seon appears to be seriously devoted to Juman's preachings, which are convincing Jin Seon that medicines are not the treatment of her illness. Jin-hee is also shocked when she learns that Jin Seon has taken a huge loan from the bank and donated the sum to Sunbaek Church. When the doctors tell Jin-hee that she needs to bring her sister for treatments before it is too late, Jin-hee finds out that Jin Seon has moved out of the house into the religious center. Despite her attempts, Jin-hee is not able to reach Jin Seon at the center as the older sister asks the guards to stop Jin-hee from seeing her. Jin-hee tells Dogi that the cops had also stopped paying attention to her requests, claiming that it was Jin Seon's religious preference, and that they had no right to bring her out of Sunbaek Religious Center. The next day, Dogi visits the religious center and finds that many other relatives, like Jin-hee, are also protesting against the church. After that, Jin Eon and Kyung-gu manage to hack the cameras inside the guarded facility, which gives Dogi and Go-eun access to what Juman's religious services look like. They are shocked when they see that Juman preached that his sick devotees did not need any medicine, but only Juman's blessing to heal from chronic illnesses. The man claims that pain and suffering were a means to cleanse a human body. Juman claims that his followers needed to tough it out and bear the pain in order to be cleaned. The religious practice included Juman assaulting his followers to teach them that bodily pain should mean nothing to them. Back at the headquarters, Go Yoon tells the group that Juman used to be a textile industrialist with a lot of failed businesses. After a dream to make his own church, Juman started preaching to desperate people and manipulated them into donating large sums of funds to his church. Go Yoon shares that the man had a lot of accusations against him where he was involved in different scams. Doogie asked Jin-Yeon to start the mission by becoming Juman's follower first. Meanwhile, Jin-Hee accepts the conditions of the revenge mission by pressing the blue button, and the crew sets out to work. Jin-Yeon first starts by visiting a hospital and putting on a scene when he starts crying. A woman comes to talk to him and brings Juman's right-hand woman to preach about his power. She tells Jin-Yeon how Juman's teachings helped her get better after she was discovered to have cancer. Listening to all this, Jin-Yeon goes to one of Juman's services and hears the woman give emotional testimony about Juman's power. The entire service is a huge display set up by Juman that gets the members of the church to start worshiping him as they donate large sums of money to the God-man. Jin-Yeon tries talking to Jin Seon there, hoping to get her out of the Sunbok Church Center. But he fails. He learns that the woman is becoming delusional and has complete faith in Juman's preachings. Jin-Yeon tries to take Jin Seon to the hospital, but she declines the offer and states that she needs to suffer to be completely free from sin. Meanwhile, Doogie does his best to set up the trap for Juman. He shops for a hanbok and different relics in order to execute his plan. He also claims that meeting Juman was the next thing on his agenda. On the other hand, Jin-Yeon attends another healing service at the Sunbak Church and drinks the healing water that Juman was making his followers drink in exchange for huge sums of money. However, instead of swallowing it like the other followers, Jin-Yeon spits it out but is found out by one of Juman's followers. The man takes Jin-Yeon to an isolated room and traps him there until he has memorized the 10 commandments of Juman. After spending the entire night in that room, Jin-Yeon is finally out the next morning, and it seems as though the man has been through a lot. The following day, Juman and his right-hand woman are out on a date when he gives her an expensive necklace set for her touching testimony at the service. At the restaurant, the godman talks about how his followers were extremely dumb for believing in his preachings. There is a camera at the restaurant that is recording all of their conversation. After some time, the waitress brings Juman a bill from a different table and claims that the guest asked Juman to pay for his meal. Juman gets angry at this and goes to talk to the customer at the table. It turns out to be Doogie and Kyunggu dressed in religious cloaks on that table. The entire interaction seems absurd to Juman, but Doogie warns Juman to be careful as death is looming on his head. Juman ignores the two men and walks back to his table. He prefers to pay for their bill instead of having an argument with them. As Juman leaves the restaurant, a light box falls right in front of him and startles him. The light box was inches away from falling on the head of Juman. He is shocked but thinks back about what Doogie had said. Back at the restaurant, Go Yoon tells Doogie that Juman has added the drug named meperidine hydrochloride to his drink, which he offers to his followers. This drug works like a painkiller in the healing water. At this point, Doogie states that it is finally time for them to start the revenge plan. Meanwhile, Juman's men tell him that the construction of his new church had to be stopped because of the discovery of multiple relics at the site. Juman comes to the site and destroys the relics for the workers. When he destroys the last relic, dark smoke comes out of it, but Juman ignores it and tells his workers that the construction of Sunbake Church cannot be delayed any further. On his drive back, Juman starts seeing sinister things on his way, but does not make much of it. His car breaks down in the middle of the abandoned road, but he is unable to call for help as there is no service on his phone. He finds Doogie dressed as a monk nearby in a graveyard and asks for his phone to call for help. However, Doogie performs a ritual and claims that he had sent away death that was looming over Juman's head and freed him. Right then, Juman finds the cell service in his phone has restarted and leaves the place after making fun of Doogie. The fake godman has refused to believe another scammer like himself. Goen jokes that the man lacks faith and that Doogie will have to try harder with him. Before the next service, Juman is informed that one of his followers had collapsed and died during a prayer service. The man is worried because there were also witnesses to the incident. So Juman goes to the cops and tells them how the man was sick but did not want to go back home. Juman fakes his emotions for the man and tells police that the man willingly chose to stay at the prayer center instead of going back to his family. The deceased man's family members are furious and want to kill Juman, but the cops shield him. In the meantime, Sung Chol dresses himself up to threaten Juman. On his drive back, Juman notices a sinister figure right in the middle of the road. At the same time, his seatbelt fastens, and he is not able to drive properly. After almost causing a road accident on the empty street, Juman calls the car repair shop to complain about the faulty seatbelt. Go Yoon answered the call and claimed that the repair shop was not to blame for the seatbelt, as they had double-checked everything. Juman somehow makes it back to the prayer center, but still sees the ghost, Sung Cheol, haunting him in the darkness. His right-hand woman takes him away and claims that he isn't well and should go see a doctor. The next morning, Juman is at a medical center getting a consultation for his hallucinations. Go Yoon watches the consultation and wonders how Juman is okay with watching his followers die without any medical help while he is getting treatment for his own concerns. After the consultation, Juman remembers Dogi, who had already warned him about the potential danger to his life. So he goes to pay Dogi a visit, but Kyung-gu, Dogi's assistant, tells him that Dogi is a busy man, and the only appointment he had was from 2 years later. Juman is shocked when he gets a taste of his own tactics, and Dogi threatens to call the cops if Juman does not leave his private property. So Juman makes a call, and after some time, his men kidnap Dogi and bring him to his office at the prayer center. Dogi had anticipated this already and started his elaborate scheme to scare Juman with Sung Cheol present to haunt him from the two-way mirror box. Together, both Dogi and Sung Cheol manage to scare Juman so much that the fake godman starts believing in Dogi's power. He begs for Dogi to help save him. Dogi concludes that the relics Juman had destroyed had brought death upon him and claims that they needed to perform a ritual to save the godman. He gives Juman a talisman and asks him to keep them close to himself. Back at his office, Juman starts placing the talisman around his office. The following day, he continues his services and holds another healing service where he would slap his followers. Seeing how Jin Seon was in a very bad state, Jin Yeon volunteers to take the slaps before her. Outside the prayer center, Kyung-gu treats Jin Yeon to a meal for his suffering. Meanwhile, Dogi claims that it is time for them to visit Juman's dead mother. At the Sunbaek Prayer Center, Jin Yeon manages to sabotage Juman's service by spreading dark ink, alay everywhere, which is symbolic of the evil spirit. Juman has gotten very fearful and brings Dogi to his cabin for another inspection. Dogi checks the talisman given earlier, which is also now turned black. So Dogi claims that Juman is going to die soon and that he should accept his fate. Hearing this, Juman is very much scared and asks Dogi to help save his life instead. In his house, Dogi again makes up a show for Juman and pretends to be possessed by the spirit of Juman's mother. He uses Go Yoon's research skills to make Juman believe it by uttering the famous sentences of his mother, which she used to say to Juman. Dogi, under the influence of Juman's mother's spirit, announces the date of Juman's death, which was to be in the next few days. After some time, when Dogi has regained control over his body, Juman asks Dogi to save him and mentions that he would do anything it takes to stay alive. Dogi claims that they would need to perform an elaborate ritual to save the fake godman from death and put the ghost that was haunting him to rest. Dogi makes Juman wear a necklace that has a camera in it. He also asks the man to bring him all the wealth he has and all the valuable jewelry he owns for the ritual. Dogi also claims that Juman could not hold any service at the time leading up to the ritual and states that the godman needed to stop taking offerings from his followers too. Juman agrees to all of his conditions and even takes a loan from the bank to fund Dogi's ritual. But his girlfriend or right-hand woman is shocked when she sees this. The ritual starts, and Dogi performs an elaborate act, beating the man to a pulp in order to release the ghost that was haunting him. Juman was falling prey to a scam similar to the one he himself was responsible for. Meanwhile, Jin Yeon keeps a tab on Jin Seon, who gets sicker over time. After the ritual, Juman is in the hospital, so his girlfriend starts taking over the prayer center. She tells the devotees that the godman had asked her to take over the services. However, Juman learns about this and rushes to the prayer center himself to stop all this. Juman and the woman start fighting there, and Jin Yeon uses this moment to expose the truth behind the scammer. He shows video evidence of Juman at the hospital as well as his interaction with his girlfriend, where they are calling their followers dumb. They have betrayed the devotees for all this time, so they start beating the fake godman up. Jin Seon finally realizes the truth, and Jin Eon helps take her out of the center. Outside the center, many other family members of the devotees are waiting to reunite with their family members. At night, Dogi watches the two sisters, Jin Seon and Jin Hee, take a walk by the beach after Jin Seon has restarted her treatment. Juman, who is still a devotee of Dogi, agrees to board a carriage truck upon Dogi's request. He drags his girlfriend along with him. Once they're inside the carriage, Sung Cheol locks the two in and drops them into the ocean. Right then, Dogi calls Juman and asks him to turn his ways and find a religion to save him. Later, Sung Cheol is having a meal with Jo Jin-woo from the prosecutor's office, who is there to deliver a package for Sung Cheol. He takes the package to Dogi and hands the evidence from the case in Kotaya. Back at the rooftop of Dogi's apartment building, Ha-jun comes there and asks Dogi something about getting revenge over a guy who has been beating his brothers up. Ha-jun claims that he would rather be friends with the guy who is beating his brothers up in order to learn more about the man. Dogi claims that, given his history, it would not be wise to make such a person his friend. After that, Ha-jun seeks permission to use Dogi's house toilet and begins to look around the place. Ha-jun finds the documents from the Vietnam case and wonders how Dogi got his hands on such confidential documents. Dogi arrives inside the apartment right then and asks him to wander about in his house. The following day, Ha-jun meets with the chief of police, Mr. Hyun-jo, to ask about a confidential delivery that was made to the prosecutor's office from Kotaya. Ha-jun confronts Hyun-jo about the documents leaving Kotaya without his knowledge. He warns the cop about double-crossing him, but the police officer warns Ha-jun to be careful. After dropping the man off at the Seoul police station, Hyun-jo leaves to get into his office, where Ha-jun follows him. He threatens to kill the police officer and warns him about messing with him. Ha-jun tells the cop that he must let any intel about his businesses reach him first. Meanwhile, Dogi drops off a passenger at the local hospital, where he spots a man, Han Jae-duk, who has set up a camp outside the hospital. He is protesting against the hospital's director, Dr. Ahn Young-suk. He is protesting outside the office and blames the doctor for what happened to his daughter. Dogi is shocked to see how Jae-duk reacts to seeing Dr. Ahn, and she is forced to go inside the hospital after being insulted by him. Later that night, Jae-duk accidentally finds the revenge helpline on the footpath and gives Sung Cheol a call for a ride. During the ride, Jae-duk tells Dogi the story of his daughters being stuck in a coma. A year ago, So Ryan, who is Jae-duk's daughter, was in the ICU for a minor 3-hour surgery that was performed by Dr. Ahn. After some time, Jae-duk noticed that the nurses had taken more blood to the surgery room. However, once the surgery is over, Dr. Ahn brings out an unconscious So Ryan, stating that the operation was successful. However, So Ryan never woke up after that. Jae-duk then sued Dr. Ahn for performing the surgery under the influence of alcohol. However, the court ruled in Dr. Ahn's favor, as there was no evidence against the doctor. They supposed the condition of Jae-duk's daughter was due to the complications of anesthesia. Back in the present, Dogi starts tailing Dr. Ahn, who is going around the city doing volunteer work. After getting an urgent call, Dr. Ahn stops Dogi's cab to give her a ride to the hospital. She is on a call with a radio jockey during the ride and gives an interview about her volunteer work. However, when Dogi tries to get some information about Jae-duk from Dr. Ahn, she refuses to chat with the taxi driver. At the end of their ride, Dogi notices how Dr. Ahn's hands shivered while giving the credit card for the payment. When he scans her card for the payment, Go-eun is able to hack into her personal information. She learned that the doctor had a drinking addiction and engaged in drinking frequently, but her card is never used to purchase the drinks. After that, Dogi enters the hospital and finds that the staff praises Dr. Ahn a lot. Her image is spotless everywhere, so the group is forced to think about whether they should take the case or not. After some time, Dogi decides to pay the hospital another visit and finds Jae-duk sitting by So Ryan's bed. Go-eun arrives at the hospital too and tries to get into the hospital's CCTV system. Jin-yeon and Kyung-gu are there too, as Go-eun works through the hospital CCTV data to figure out what went wrong during So Ryan's surgery. But Go-eun is stumped when she learns that there is no information about that operation on the computers. Dogi calls to check if Go-eun has any intel and informs her that he is going to check the physical files of the hospital records. Dogi made his way inside the hospital archives in order to find some information about So Ryan's case, and he knew that 10 years' worth of medical records needed to be preserved by hospitals by the law. He notices that a bunch of documents are being destroyed by the hospital after they are strategically placed under a leaking pipe. Luckily, Dogi finds So Ryan's documents there, but sees that the files are already highly damaged. Now, going inside the operation room was their only way to see what Dr. Ahn was up to. Dogi disguises himself as one of the doctors from the hospital and assists the nurses in taking a patient into the operating room. He manages to sneak inside the surgery room, but an alarm sets off as soon as he turns on the camera in his glasses. Go-eun tells him that the room could be sensitive to radio detectors, which would prevent any filming or camera work in the operation room. With no way to leave, Dogi hides out in the operating room as Dr. Ahn asks her men to check what is going on inside. She confronts her juniors about bringing a camera into the surgery room, but Go-eun manages to turn the alarm off. Dr. Ahn asks her assistant to look into the matter and goes back to the operating room. When she is about to find Dogi, Go-eun sets the alarm on another time to distract her. Dr. Ann's assistant tells her that the sensor to the operation room alarm might be broken. Dr. Ahn goes back in to check the closet that Dogi was hiding in, but it is empty now. When Dogi tells Jae-duk about the operating room alarm, Jae-duk thinks that the detector could have been set up because of him as he went inside the operating room earlier with the camera to record what happens in that room. Go-eun explains that a device like that is very expensive, believing Dr. Ahn could have been hiding something big. The group tries to read So Urian's medical documents, while Sung Chol states that Jae-duk had paid a hefty sum of $55,000 for the surgery alone. Sung Chol explains that instead of taking benefits from medical insurance, Jae-duk chose to take a loan to fight the hospital for their misconduct with So Ryan's operation. After listening to all this, Dogi decides to go back into the hospital surgery room, this time as a patient, to observe what Dr. Ahn is up to. After causing a fake accident, Sung Chol takes Dogi to the hospital due to a concussion. As per Dogi's instruction, Go-eun waits for 3 minutes before turning the camera on his glasses so as to avoid setting the alarm in the operating room. Before the 3 minutes are up, Dogi is brought up into the operating room and is given anesthesia that causes him to pass out. Dr. Ahn takes Dogi's glasses out and places them away before starting the surgery. Right then, Go-eun turns on the camera, causing the alarm to set. In the recording, she can see that Dr. Ahn had waited for her subordinate to enter the operation theater before leaving. To everyone's surprise, Dr. Ahn was letting Dr. Gong perform the surgery in her place. Now Dogi is on the operating table and ready to be operated by Dr. Gong. Dr. Gong is Dr. Ahn's junior and was doing the operation instead of the senior doctor. Dr. Ahn doesn't do the surgeries herself because she is addicted to drinking and spends time in the secret room drinking alcohol there. Suddenly, there comes a phone call that stops him from performing the surgery, where a nurse announces that the real patient is waiting outside the operation theater. Dr. Ahn is surprised by the mistake, and she asks the nurses to take Dogi out of the room. Hours later, Dogi wakes up after the effects of the anesthesia have run off. Near his general ward bed, Dogi finds Dr. Ahn waiting for him. She apologizes for the mix-up of patients and promises to transfer him to a local hospital that would be able to better cater to his medical needs. But Dogi acts as if he is in extreme pain. He wants to stay there to check on Dr. Ahn's activities. Dogi tries to get out of the hospital in the middle of the night. In the meantime, he spots a man run into the hospital using the rear exit. The person was going to the Metatopia unit, which manufactures medical equipment. Suddenly, he gets a call from Dr. Ahn and is called to the operation room from the back gate. Dogi sneaks in behind the man and learns that he is Mr. Gong Soo-ho, the sales intern at Metatopia. Go-eun and Dogi are shocked to see the number of surgeries Soo-ho has performed as he worked with Dr. Ahn. Back at the Rainbow Taxi headquarters, Sung Chol explains that Soo-ho was a ghost doctor, one who performs the surgeries for a small sum of money in place of the senior doctor. These doctors are usually residents or other, less famous doctors who perform the surgery while the actual doctor uses their time to book more appointments from consultations. Go-eun shares that Dr. Ahn used to practice under a different name before working with the hospital. She adds that Dr. Ahn was a repeat offender and had gotten her practice temporarily suspended due to a similar ghost doctor fraud. Soo-ho meets Dr. Ahn at a bar where she is drinking heavily. Here, we see Dr. Ahn controlling Soo-ho and manipulating him into performing the surgeries by threatening to replace him with another surgeon. She also threatens him to replace his surgical instruments company supplies with some other company. She tells Soo-ho that he had to perform 2 surgeries that evening. Back at the headquarters, Go-eun claims that she had been playing safe by using Soo-ho's credit card to consume alcohol, which is why her record was clean. Moreover, Dogi is adamant he won't let these 2 perform any more surgeries. Instead of letting Dr. Ahn's assistant pick Soo-ho, Dogi picks the intern in his taxi. There, Dogi plays video evidence of him in the operating room instead of Dr. Ahn. Then, He asks him to tell the truth about So Ryan's operation. So, Suho narrates that after an accident in the operating room, So Ryan started losing a lot of blood that evening. Dr. An arrived in time to save the day, but considering that she was drunk, she was not able to correct Suho's mistakes. She asked for So Ryan's incision to be stitched without surgery. Back in the present, Dogi confronts Suho for staying silent about the accident for so long. He claims that if he were a whistleblower, he would be destroyed, which is why he had to do what Dr. An asked him. At the hospital, Dr. An is pissed that Suho wasn't there to perform the surgery that day. She tells her assistant to stop making any payments to Metatopia and asks him to look for a new equipment dealer. Meanwhile, Dogi is still acting as a patient at the hospital, but he is sure there is more to Dr. An, which he has yet to discover. Right then, Ha-jun is at the hospital and acts concerned about Dogi being admitted there. Dogi asks him about their last conversation about befriending one's enemy, and Ha-jun claims that it would not be wise for him to do so. After the conversation, Dogi realizes that most of the patients who were getting surgeries from Dr. An did not have relatives and next of kin waiting for them. Then why Ha-jun is there? The following day, Dr. An is doing volunteer work, where she offers free consultations to senior citizens who live alone. When one old man claims that he did not feel the need to get surgery, she forces him to get one done and books a slot for him. Dogi concludes that Dr. An was only doing this to senior citizens who were under South Korea's welfare plan in order to make money from them. He also claims that she selected senior citizens with no caring relatives in order to have a clean record in case of an accident. Meanwhile, Sung Chol is in So Ryan's hospital room, talking to Jae-duk about his love and dedication to his daughter. The father thanks Sung Chol for paying her medical bills. The following day, Dr. An is golfing when she meets with another Metatopia sales intern. She cracks the same deal with him as she has with Suho and asks him to practice performing surgery on practice surgical kits. After some time, Dr. An rushes to the hospital when she gets a call about the old man being in critical condition after one of her surgeries. She alleges that the man was unwell due to his age and asked her head nurse to take care of him. Dr. An also asked her assistant to prepare for the man's funeral and asked for the medical records to be taken care of. When the assistant goes to the break room to destroy the documents, Dogi follows him there and beats the man to a pulp. The rest of the group also enters the hospital with Jinyeon playing the security guard, Kyung-gu playing a janitor, Go-won playing a nurse, and Sung-cheol playing a doctor. Sung-cheol manages to get the old man out of the hospital with the others' help. Dogi also asks to be discharged and leaves the hospital voluntarily. In the meantime, Dr. An is busy owning to her book release and is on a TV show promoting it. The showrunner interrupts Dr. An and claims that they received a tip about the doctor donating all her profits from the year to the country's welfare program. Dr. An is caught off guard and calls her assistant after the filming. She is pissed that such a donation was made in her name without her permission, but the assistant claims that the donor form was signed by the doctor and that it cannot be taken back. Actually, the taxi group forged Dr. An's signs on the donation documents. Then Dr. An gets another call from the hospital claiming that the health department was there to assess the hospital for an anonymous tip. The claims from the tip are proven to be true as the team finds the reused syringes there. Dr. An claims that there's CCTV footage to prove her innocence, but the employee bit back and said that the footage is regularly deleted on Dr. An's orders. To add to her difficulties, Sohoo surrenders himself to the cops and exposes the real face of Dr. An. So the cops immediately come and arrest Dr. An. After coming out of prison on bail, Dr. An plans on escaping the charges by paying a fine and changing her name one more time. She has come again into her secret room to collect her costly beverages. Suddenly, she hears the alarm sound when Dogi comes into the hospital's operation theater. He quickly approaches Dr. An and sedates her with an anesthetic. He threatens to operate on her without any experience to make her feel as her patients used to. Dr. An tries to get out of the situation by bribing Dogi but fails. At the same time, So Ryan wakes up from her coma and Jae-duk finally reunites with his daughter. After the case is solved, Ha-jun gives the police chief a go-ahead to blow up Dogi's taxi. Dogi and the team are closing the taxi when they hear an alarming signal on the radio. He moves the taxi away from the one Kyung-gu was driving. The others follow the taxi and are shocked to see the taxi Dogi was driving blow up into flames. In the next scene, everyone is present at the funeral of Kim Dogi. Go-yoon is sobbing her heart out at the memorial service, while Kyung-gu can't seem to accept that Dogi has passed away. Jinyeon breaks down while Ha-jun is at the service, observing the reactions of the revenge crew. Later, Ha-jun thanks the police chief, Hyun-jo, for his help in planting the bomb under Dogi's car. He asks the officer for a record of all the people who come to pay their respects to Dogi. Hyun-jo sends out civilian investigators to test out the evidence collected from the trash at Dogi's memorial service. Meanwhile, back at the taxi driver's secret headquarters, Go-yoon, Kyung-gu, Jin-yeon, and Sung Cheol are sitting in silence, waiting for Dogi, who is going to arrive by 9 p.m. Suddenly, Dogi's taxi begins to roll in, and a flashback takes us back to the night of the incident. During one of their conversations in the taxi, Go-yoon detected some noise and informed Dogi about the signal interruption before the bomb could be set off. Dogi had then gotten alert and driven off to an abandoned street. While the others were initially shocked to see the taxi burst into flames, Dogi had already managed to escape the moving vehicle with only a few scratches. The group manages to get back to the headquarters with no one hurt, and Sung Cheol is relieved to hear this. There, the group uses a drone to examine the kind of bomb that was used to burst the taxi and learn that a TNT explosive, one that is used by the military, was attached to the bottom of the taxi. Dogi infers that someone had learned about their revenge business and now hates them a lot. He also says that they need to find out who that person is by holding a funeral and asks the group to make a huge scene where the culprit could come pay a visit and make their intentions known. The group starts taking spy cam photos of all the people at the funeral home who are unfamiliar and sends them to Dogi, who is running a search on them. Dogi gets a better look at the car to which one of the men had delivered a secret folder to. He recognizes the ring on the driver's finger and runs a check. Later, Dogi follows the vehicle in his van and ends up at the Black Sun nightclub. Meanwhile, Sung Cheol puts Dogi's fake ashes to rest in order to culminate their fake funeral plan. On the other hand, Hyun-jo gave the confidential folder to Ha-jun and reported that the funeral had successfully ended. Ha-jun feels that something is off and wonders if he should kill another member of the group. Hyun-jo reveals that the bishop was about to arrive any time now and that Ha-jun should prepare for that. He mentions that the bishop had said that Ha-jun should focus on his real job instead of playing these games. A meeting with the bishop takes place via video conference, and the other executives join alongside Ha-jun and Hyun-ju. All these people are wearing the same rings that Dogi had noticed the driver wearing earlier. The meeting seems more like a ritual. After that, Ha-jun goes back to the Rainbow Taxi Agency and hands in his resignation to Sung Cheol without a discussion with him. Before leaving, Ha-jun thanks Sung Cheol for being genuinely nice to him despite him causing an accident on his first day on the job. He wishes Sung Cheol well and wishes him a long life. Before leaving, Ha-jun claims that his act of kindness had saved Sung Cheol's life. Back to the present day, the group is greeted by Dogi in his new revenge taxi. Go-eun shares a list identifying all of the unknown people at the funeral service and notes that all these men worked for the same nightclub, Black Sun. There, Sung Cheol shows the group Ha-jun's resignation letter and claims that Ha-jun's behavior has been a suspect throughout his term in their company. Later, the group decides to visit the Black Sun nightclub to find out the truth behind Ha-jun. Go-eun offers Dogi a change from his regular clothes to go into the club, but Kyung-gu and Jin-yeon, who are dressed in funky outfits, claim that they will be going inside the club since Dogi is supposed to be dead. They both try to make it inside the club, but are stopped from entering by the guards. Both men are dejected when they come back to the van, and Go-eun tells them that the distraction Kyung-gu and Jin-yeon created allowed Dogi to make his way inside. At the roof of the club, Dogi finds two men beating up a journalist for trying to expose them. They are about to throw the man off the roof, but Dogi intervenes and beats them both to save the journalist. Seeing this, the journalist runs away, looking for his secret camera, and yells at Dogi for ruining his plan. He was recording the guards beating him to save it as evidence. In the meantime, Go-eun claims that the journalist on the roof was Kim Young-min, who lost his reputation after being fired from his job. The following night, Dogi is now wearing a suit to be appropriately dressed for the club. There, Wendy, an agent at the Black Sun Club, escorts Dogi to a table. Go-eun claims that the cheapest table in the club was $3,000 and that the richest of the rich were present at the nightclub. Later, Dogi is greeted by the CEO of an entertainment agency named YN Entertainment, Madam Yang. After that, Dogi finds two men in the club who were at his funeral service. Wendy gets a drink for Dogi, and the two start chatting. She tells him how the social hierarchy works at the club and claims that the nobles never hang out with the lowly people. In the meantime, a huge scene takes place on the dance floor, where a group has ordered a $180,000 worth of meal set. Dogi is shocked but looks around and finds Guard Yang, who was at his funeral service, handing out the confidential document to the person in the car. Dogi follows the guards and tries to enter the VIP section, but is stopped. Go-Yoon suggests that Dogi should befriend a VIP to get in, so he sneaks into the VIP room to greet an old friend, Victor. Victor is an idol and leader of a K-pop group. Go-Eun looks him up while Dogi makes it seem as though Victor has forgotten an old friend after getting famous. In order to save himself from embarrassment, Victor also acts to remember Dogi and starts chatting with him. Dogi uses the information Go-Eun was narrating to him in order to build a backup story, and Victor pretends to recognize his old friend Dogi. After that, Dogi looks around the place and finds teenagers at the club, so he sends a report to the police about minors being at this club. Then Dogi hides in a room when Garjang comes inside with other junior guards and punishes them for losing the journalist. The guard gets a call from the cops, who report Dogi's text about the teenagers, and Yang asks for Dogi's number. Right then, Wendy enters the room to use the toilet, and Dogi, who was hiding inside, pretends to have lost his way. Once Dogi comes out of the VIP room, Garjang calls Dogi to ask him about the tip he made to the cops. In the next scene, Dogi is kicked out of the club, and the guards beat him up. The cops, who were already there and waiting for instructions from Garjang, leave their vehicle after Garjang instructs them to, and they arrest Dogi for obstructing a business. At the same time, Sung Cheol is meeting with an explosive expert to discuss the nature of the explosive on the taxi that Dogi was driving on the day of the explosion. The expert is certain that the anti-terrorism unit was involved in the incident, claiming that a cop had something to do with the accident. Sung Cheol remembers that Pil-sung's death was also covered as self-harm, proving that the cops were involved with whatever Ha-jung was up to. At the police station, the cops put Dogi in lockup for doing nothing against the law. Dogi is just taken into police custody upon Garjang's orders. After some time, the journalist from earlier that night comes inside the police station. His name is Kim Yong-min, and he helps release Dogi from lockup. Over a meal and some drinks, Yong-min and Dogi become friends, and Yong-min tells Dogi that he should stay away from Black Sun. Meanwhile, at the Rainbow Taxi headquarters, Go-Yoon reveals that the club has 6 owners, all of who were not the real owners, but people who posed to be the owners of the nightclub. Dogi decides that the best way to look into the club is to use a different method other than as a guest. At the same time, Park Hyun-jo, the chief of police, is also one of the owners of the club and is present in one of the VIP rooms with Victor. There, Hyun-jo signs the revenue chart for the month, and Black Sun's monthly business is $5.64 million. Then Hyun-jo tells Victor that the club keeps making a profit month after month. On the other hand, Kyung-gu and Jin-yeon had managed to take one drunk guard down from outside the club, while Dogi abducted 2 others in his taxi. Seeing this, Moon-hyun, the head guard, is angry that Guard Jang is not able to handle the guards well, so he calls someone to get replacements from the gym. Dogi is one of the men working out at that gym. He also gets selected due to his aggression as he beats 2 other gym-goers. At the club, Guard Jang is shocked to see Dogi as one of the new guards, as he is the one who complains about their club to the cops. But Dogi lies his way out of the argument by stating that he acted out of instinct that day. Moon-hyun likes Dogi's attitude and asks him to report any other minors that are seen in the club directly to him. After that, Guard Yang narrates a set of rules for the bouncers, telling them that men and women who look rich are only allowed inside the club. Since 12 a.m. was their peak hour, only VIP males were allowed to enter the club, and VIP women who look like models were granted access to the club after 12 a.m. Dogi is guard 9 and is placed on the main dance floor. As per instructions, he is not to intervene even if there are fights on the dance floor. There, CEO Yang finds Dogi as the guard this time around and seems happy to see him. During his break time, Dogi chats with the other members of the revenge crew outside, but Guard Jong spots him there. Dogi puts on a scene and kicks Jin-yeon and Kyung-go out of the club in order to hide his identity from Jong. Back in the club, Dogi now has to protect the alcohol bottle that has his employee number 9. If the bottle shatters, breaks, or is stolen, Dogi has to pay for it. Dogi follows the VIP who is holding bottle 9 and enters the VIP room. There, Dogi notices that the VIP clients are middle-aged women who are being entertained by male guards. As luck would have it, CEO Yang is in the same room as well and is talking to Ha-jun, who is also on his way inside the club. By chance, a superior guard calls Dogi out and exchanges his employee ID with him because he wants the attention of CEO Yang. Now Dogi is guard 2 and is made to wait outside, where Ha-jun notices him leave the VIP area but does not recognize him. There, Dogi witnesses two guards dragging a drunk VIP client into a car. He is called there by the other guards and is made to drive the woman home. Back in the VIP room, CEO Yang gets upset when she finds someone else wearing the 9 badge. She ends up breaking the 9 bottle, frightening the guards and the other guests. However, Hajun stops her and puts on a show to entertain CEO Yang. He challenges the guards and fights 3 of them all by himself. He manages to single-handedly beat the men up, and the VIPs are entertained by the guards being beaten up. Meanwhile, Dogi is worried about the client, who is passed out in his car, but notices that a car is following him. He whispers and asks Go-won to run a check on the number plates and learns that the car belongs to journalist Kim Young-min. Dogi tries to escape Young-min's tail, but the journalist crashes into the vehicle. The other guards inside the car recognize Young-min, while the journalist bangs again into Dogi's vehicle in an attempt to stop him. Young-min loses his balance and is about to be dashed by a truck when Dogi uses his vehicle to save the journalist. Then Young-min uses pepper spray on the guards who come to check on him and beats them up. He tells Dogi that they need to take the girl to the hospital ASAP. At the hospital, Young-min tells Dogi that the girl was drugged and would have been taken somewhere where people would have sexually assaulted her. The doctor claims that the girl had drugs in her system and adds that she had alerted the cops about it. Outside the police station, Dogi and Young-min watch as the girl is being taken away by the cops. After that, Dogi rushes back to the car, where the guards have just woken up from being passed out. Dogi pretends to be passed out too, as the other guards are worried about losing the drug girl. After his shift, Dogi met with Young-min at his house to discuss the case he was working on. There, Dogi learns that Young-min has been working on exposing the Black Sun for a long time. Upon Dogi's insistence, Young-min reveals that he was trying to avenge the death of his friend, Detective Choi Sung-eun, who was killed after he tried to expose the Black Sun. The incident was reported as a self-harm act, but Young-min knows it was staged by the Black Sun Club to look like the self-harm act. Young-min blamed himself for the incident because he drove Sung-eun to the Black Sun nightclub, where drugs worth millions were being delivered. In the flashback, Young-min gives a special pen with a hidden microphone inside to record everything at the Black Sun Club. But at night, a troubled Sung-eun had called Young-min asking for his help, but had reportedly killed himself before even meeting Young-min. Later, the cops showed Young-min some footage of Sung-eun, alleging that he had died by self-harm after being overwhelmed by loans and debt. Young-min claims that Sung-eun had seen something he should not have at the nightclub. Upon inspection of the evidence, Young-min noticed that Sung-eun did not have the spy cam pen he was given and that his entire way of walking had changed after leaving Black Sun. Young-min was also framed by Black Sun into bribing and was fired from his job. In the end, the journalist claims that he was filming himself on the rooftop, hoping that the Black Sun guards would kill him so that the video could draw some public attention to the wrongdoings of the nightclub. Hearing the whole story, Dogi leaves Rainbow Taxi's contact information for Young-min before going back to the headquarters. Go-eun and the others claim that fighting Black Sun is way out of their capabilities, while Sung-cheol claims they should take Young-min on as a client and start working on this case no matter how dangerous it is. Later that night, Dogi drops Young-min back home after pressing the blue button, and the group brings the taxi M5283 back into business. After some time, Dogi is called into work where his colleagues at the Black Sun are getting beaten up for letting the intoxicated woman get to the hospital and in the hands of the cops. After that, Dogi follows security chief Jong Seon into the secret basement and finds an archive of everything related to the Black Sun's illegal businesses. Dogi manages to escape just in time as Jong Seon makes it back into the room. Not only that, but Dogi also helps Go-eun get access to the nightclub's database. Go-eun discovers that the database consists of CCTV files showing intoxicated women entering and leaving the club. There is CCTV footage of Detective Choi as well, when he was intoxicated on the night of his death. They have kept all those videos to show them as evidence that the club is not guilty of any wrongdoings with the clients. Just then, Dogi gets a call from Wendy, and she asks to meet with him. At the golf club, Wendy asks Dogi to help her out by trying to convince Victor to forgive her. Since Victor was the VIP client who had booked to spend the night with the girl who was taken to the hospital, Wendy tells Dogi that Victor was very angry after ruining that booking, so she asks Dogi to calm Victor. Later that evening at the nightclub, Dogi manages to win Victor over with his fluency of words. Then Wendy asks Victor to choose one of the women for him to spend the night with as compensation for the ruined night of his. Victor selects a girl there and asks Dogi to be the delivery man responsible for the order this time. Dogi agrees to make the delivery, and accompanies the guards as they lead the intoxicated woman out of Black Sun. The guard makes the woman walk past the CCTV camera by herself, making it seem that she has left the nightclub on her own. Once the CCTV captures her walking out of the club herself, the guards drive her to the luxury hotel where Victor's waiting for her. At the hotel, the guards make the woman pass through the CCTV footage by herself again before taking her to Victor's room. The guards ask Dogi to call Victor to the room, and the idol jokes with his friends on chat about how he likes sleeping with women who are intoxicated and unconscious. After the delivery, when they return to the club, Dogi lies to the guards, saying that he has to use the restroom and makes it back to the room where they left the girl. Before Victor can get his hands on the girl, Dogi knocks him out, and Go-eun arrives in time to help the girl reach the hospital. Also, Kyung-gu and Jin-yeon are dressed as page boys at the hotel, and they drag Victor out of the room in a laundry bag. Then Dogi beats Victor in a junkyard for manipulating intoxicated and helpless women. At the same time, Ha-jun is in a meeting with CEO Yang, and he asks the woman to bring in 100 kilograms of drugs into the country. CEO Yang is shocked at Ha-jun's sudden request for such a huge number of drugs. Then Ha-jun gets a call from Hyun-jo. The senior police officer asks Ha-jun to make sure he becomes the next commissioner. After the call ended, Ha-jun claimed that he had changed his mind, and now he wanted CEO Yang to bring in 200 kilos of drugs. Ha-jun claims that he is confident he will be able to manage the delivery of the drugs, no matter how big the risk is. That night, Wendy is drugging a girl's drink for one of the VIPs when she gets a call from Victor with a special request. Soon there is chaos at the club when members of a hiking club make it inside Black Sun. Sung Cheol leads the old men and women who have all purchased the VIP passes inside Black Sun, but Yong Seon is not able to stop any of them. With the club being crowded with old men and women, there is chaos. Kyung-gu takes over the DJ station and starts playing trot music, leading all the youngsters to leave the club. Jong Seon tells Moon-hyun that these elderly guests had all purchased the VIP pass from Wendy and had taken over the club. Moon-hyun asks the guards to shut down the club for the night. He is angry at Wendy for ruining the night, but she claims that Victor had asked her for the passes for these old people. Back at the Rainbow Taxi headquarters, Go-eun tells the team that the Black Sun guards are storing the CCTV footage to save the VIP men from legal troubles. She claims that the CCTV footage showed the women voluntarily entering the hotel rooms of the VIPs, which made it impossible to file a sexual assault complaint against the men who had assaulted them. The next day, Ha-jun is watching the news, which details a 200-plus kilo drug bust by Inspector Hyun-jo's team after a sting operation. To CEO Yang's surprise, Ha-jun had orchestrated this in order to improve Hyun-jo's public image so that he would be made commissioner. CEO Yang is still pissed that a huge number of drugs was confiscated by the cops, but Ha-jun promises that he will make things better again. Meanwhile, Dogi arrives to work at Black Sun and notices that a VIP room is being cleaned after Ha-jun brutally beats the guards up inside to please CEO Yang and her friends. He finds the two cops who had arrested him there. The cops are taking care of the fact that the guards have destroyed all the evidence well. Doogie asks Go-eun to look up the police station that handled all the cases from Black Sun, and Go-eun finds out that the Jongsan police station was deeply involved in illegal activities at the club. Later that night, Moon-hyun asks Dogi to have a drink with him and asks about Victor, as Dogi has been his friend. Dogi claims that Victor is ignoring his phone calls. After 3 drinks, the drug in Dogi's drink starts showing its effects, and Dogi is starting to pass out. After that, Moon-hyun starts beating Dogi up because he has suspicions about Dogi. Then Moon-hyun asks Jong-seon to get rid of him. The guards make Dogi walk past the CCTV camera until he passes out and then drag him out of the nightclub. Moon-hyun asks for Dogi to be dropped off at the main junction in order for a passing car to hit him in an accident, which could lead to his death. However, Kyung-gu drives the van to the location, and Go-eun reaches the location in just time to save Dogi from being hit by a passing truck. Just then, Jong-seon tries to run them both over, but Kyung-gu manages to intercept the Black Sun van, saving Dogi and Go-eun from being hit. After a whole day, Dogi wakes up in a hospital bed and is unable to remember what happened to him. Dogi tells Go-eun that before losing his memory, he had managed to find the pen that reporter Young Min had given to Detective Choi earlier. In the pen, Young Min and Dogi find a recording of what had happened on the night of Detective Choi's murder. A flashback takes us to that night when Detective Choi had witnessed his fellow colleagues return the confiscated drugs back to Black Sun. After Choi finds the 2 other cops celebrating with Moon-hyun and guard Jong-seon. Detective Choi tries to arrest the cops and the Black Sun staff for illegally smuggling the drugs, but he is overpowered by the guards. The detective manages to put his recording pen in the VIP room and turns it on before he is forced to drink the drugged alcohol similar to what Dogi was made to consume. After that, Detective Choi is shown walking out of the nightclub and sitting in his car before his dead body is eventually discovered. Back in the present day, Dogi tells Young Min that the recording pen had a comment from Detective Choi that could only be decoded by the reporter. Young Min listens to the recording again and again and recalls his conversation with Choi. Back when he was alive, Detective Choi had enrolled Young Min in a gym membership, but Young Min didn't want to go to the gym. In the secret message of the recording, Detective Choi mentioned about that gym. So Young Min calls the gym to see if they still have the locker Detective Choi had reserved for him. In the locker, Young Min finds a note from Choi with all the evidence that the reporter would need against Black Sun. It was recorded that instead of incinerating the drugs like they were supposed to, the cops themselves were handing over the confiscated drugs to Black Sun. At the Rainbow Taxi headquarters, Go-Eun tells the team that the drug Black Sun was circulating in the club was called GHB, gamma-hydroxybutyric acid, which when consumed with alcohol, makes one appear to be in a state of trance. She adds that the person who consumes the drug is able to perform simple tasks like walking upon instruction, but cannot remember anything that they had done from the moment they ingested the drug. Sung Cheol adds that the drug was popularly called the rape drug. Later that night, the main leader of all the evil beings, named Bishop, lands back in the country after the pilgrimage. He meets Ha Jun along with all his subordinates. After some time, all the people with the special rings on their fingers are present at a church where the bishop is giving a sermon. Later, CEO Yang thanked Hyunjo and Ha Jun for bringing back most of the GHB drugs that were allegedly confiscated by the cops and Hyunjo's team. Ha Jun promises to have the remainder of the drugs sent back to her. Just then, Moon Hyun tells Hyunjo about Dogi, and Ha Jun is shocked that the taxi driver is still alive. He anticipates that Dogi could cause them more trouble and starts to panic. Right after that, Ha Jun and his men raid the Rainbow Taxi headquarters, but are not able to find any of the members there. Then Ha Jun returns to Bishop and tells him about Dogi, but the religious leader asks him not to panic and continue their mission as it was scheduled. The next day, the Rainbow Taxi group is ready to act on their plan, while Ha Jun is alert for Dogi's next move. The cops manage to take the drugs to the incineration plant as planned. On the way, the cops call Hyunjo about the road being under construction, but Ha Jun instructs Hyunjo to make the cops take the same route as planned without any last-minute changes. After a couple of hours, the cops hand over the drugs to Moon Hyun and Ha Jun successfully. However, Ha Jun finds it odd that he was able to get his hands on the drugs so easily. He is sure that Dogi is planning something big, but cannot put his finger on it. The mission to smuggle the drugs to international clients is on his plan, and the Black Sun nightclub is full of international smugglers. Wendy and Yong Seon are selling the drugs to international clients. Meanwhile, Hyunjo is preparing to be promoted to Commissioner of Police that same evening. All of a sudden, CEO Yang arrives at the Black Sun and tells Ha Jun that her GHB drugs have been replaced with flour. Ha Jun is not able to make sense of what happened, and just then, all the international buyers start falling after being unconscious in the nightclub. As it turns out, the Jineon and Kyunggu had replaced the regular alcohol that the buyers were consuming with GHB drug alcohol, making them pass out on the spot. Chaos breaks out at the Black Sun, and Ha Jun makes eye contact with Dogi, who is looking down at him from the VIP area. A flashback takes us back to the day before the drug smuggling, where Jineon and Kyunggu had replaced the GHB drugs with flour, while Go-Eun had hacked into the police system to unlock the locks. Back to the present time, Ha Jun gets a call from Hyunjo claiming that his office is being raided and that the narcotics department has found all of the GHB drugs in the to-be commissioner's office. Hearing all this, Ha Jun is shocked and promises to teach Dogi a lesson before escaping. Meanwhile, the real cops raid the Black Sun nightclub and arrest everyone involved in the drug smuggling, including CEO Yang, Moon Hyun, Wendy, and Yong Seon. Meanwhile, the corrupt cops are also arrested and charged with the murder of Detective Choi. The following day, Ha Jun kills Hyunjo in order to save everyone in the organization, as he is soon to be investigated. Meanwhile, Young Min thanks Dogi and the team for finally bringing justice to Detective Choi and pays for the deluxe taxi ride as promised. Reporter Young Min is back at his job and is reporting the arrest of the Black Sun employees as well as the other VIPs involved in the case. Later that night, we see Bishop trying to kill Ha-jun, but then decides to spare his life when he begs for a second chance. Ha-jun promises the bishop that he'll kill Dogi this time. In a flashback, we see the time when Ha-jun was a child at a children's welfare home. At the children's facility, the bishop, who was then only a priest, ran a secret organization where kidnapped children were brought in. As a child, Ha-jun was bullied for not having a name of his own. In retaliation to the bullying, Ha-jun ends up killing another child named An Ha-jun. The bishop hides what Ha-jun has done and asks Officer Hyun-jo to dismiss the death of the real Ha-jun as an accident. He then praises Ha-jun for coming out victorious in the battle and gives him the identity of being the new Ha-jun. As he grows up, Ha-jun follows the footsteps of the bishop and gains the title of manager on the bishop's right-hand man. He is also added to the cult with a ring that all other members of the cult wear. Back in the present day, Dogi and the taxi crew discuss the same ring that they had seen many of the people at Black Sun wear. Dogi mentions that the ringleader in Vietnam was wearing the same ring. Also, Pil Sung was spotted wearing the same ring. Go-eun adds that the sign on the ring, a cross and a snake, was similar to the Field Consulting logo. The scene shifts to Lee Se-won, an employee who works at the foreign currency office. When Se-won is on his way back home, he is framed for trying to stab someone in the parking lot and immediately sent to prison. At the same time, Bishop is informed about the Rainbow Taxi Revenge Group by his subordinates. On the other hand, Sung Chul gets a call from another client. So Dogi goes out to pick up the said client, who surprisingly is none other than the bishop. As a client, the bishop tells Dogi that his son, Si-won, was in prison for exposing 3 individuals. When Si-won discovers that 3 individuals were depositing huge sums of money in 2 overseas businesses that had a similar logo, a cross, and a snake, he files a complaint against the individuals. These individuals are Kim Hyung-sub, leader of the Vietnam gang, Kang Pil-sung, CEO of Field Consulting, and Yang Mi-kyung, CEO of the entertainment agency, as well as a named owner of Black Sun. The group concludes that these huge money transfers outside South Korea were connected with Black Sun and Ha-jun. They decide to take on the case and help protect Si-won, whose life may be in danger. Meanwhile, a flashback shows that Sung Chul had gotten a call from Police Chief Hyun-jo before his death. The late police officer told Sung Cheol that the Black Sun drug scandal was just the tip of the iceberg of the many fraudulent activities carried out by the cult. Hyun-jo asks Sung Cheol to look at an old case that had more details in exchange for saving his life. However, before Sung Cheol could act on the information, Ha-jun had already killed Hyun-jo. Back to the present, since Si-won is scheduled to be in court in a few days in order to testify against the foreign transactions, Dogi, Kyung-gu, and Jin-yeon get themselves arrested at the same prison where Si-won was locked up. In prison, Dogi asserts his dominance by pretending to be a psycho and threatens all the thug inmates. Once he learns that there is a bounty on Si-won's head, he threatens to kill the inmate who would try to harm him. He also gives Si-won a pepper spray bottle in order to protect himself when needed. Meanwhile, Sung Chul manages to get his hands on the case file that Hyun-jo was talking about and learns about the children's welfare home and how the children there were either deceased or reported to be missing. After a few days in prison, Dogi finds something off with what is going on. He tells Go-eun that things are pretty normal and that Si-won is not in any real danger, which makes everything much more suspicious. However, after a few days, Dogi, Kyung-gu, Jin-yeon, and Si-won are all released to go back home as part of their plan. Just as they are about to leave, the police chief takes Dogi back to prison while the rest are made to go back home. Sung Cheol, on the other hand, pays a visit to the children's welfare facility and arrives at the place where Ha-jun operates. Once inside the facility, Sung Cheol is shocked to see that the bishop is none other than the man pretending to be Si-won's father. He also finds photos of the missing, deceased children, as well as Ha-jun with the bishop. Suddenly, Sung Cheol is mugged from behind and put inside a room. Things get much more complicated for Dogi, too, in prison, where he discovers that a bounty has been placed on his head. Ha-jun pays Dogi a visit and threatens him by claiming that Jin-yeon, Kyung-gu, and Go-eun have been kidnapped. He also adds that Si-won was killed and that Sung Cheol is being held captive by his men. Dogi asks Ha-jun to let the others go, as his fight is with Dogi after all. But Ha-jun threatens Dogi by saying that there's a reason why he's kept in prison on the day when Si-won was to testify in court. He announces that the bounty on Dogi's head has been doubled, which leads the inmates to go wild in trying to kill Dogi. From his secret room, Ha-jun watches as Dogi is hunted down by the inmates. However, Ha-jun is impressed at how Do-gi manages to fight all the inmates. At the same time, Sung-cheol wakes up in the welfare home and is invited to have a meal with the bishop. Sung-cheol mocks him for being an assailant, posing to be a clergyman for assaulting, exploiting, and killing innocent children for his enjoyment and personal gain. The bishop claims that Ha-jun is his most trusted follower, and this poses a challenge to him regarding who among Ha-jun and Do-gi will win in this battle. Just then, in prison, Ha-jun brings Do-gi into the secret room with him for a game. Ha-jun asks Do-gi to pick one of his 3 friends that he'll kill. Do-gi threatens to always remember what Ha-jun was doing to his people, adding that the victims always remember the injustice done to their loved ones and will come back to kill Ha-jun. After that, Do-gi claims that Ha-jun has already lost the game they were supposedly playing. Ha-jun turns on the news and finds Si-won leaving the courthouse after testifying against the illegal transfer of funds related to Black Sun. A flashback takes us to the time when Do-gi was having his suspicions while in prison. After Sung-cheol discovers the welfare facility, the group collectively decides to put themselves in danger in order to help Si-won testify against Ha-jun's cult. Kyung-gu, Jin-yeon, and Go-eun had managed to escape Ha-jun's men by using pepper spray on them. Sung-cheol can also be seen voluntarily entering the welfare home in order to throw the bishop off. At the prison, Ha-jun is angered by the fact that he was outsmarted by Do-gi yet again. He snatches the gun from the police chief and points it at Do-gi, threatening to kill him with his own hands. As Ha-jun tries to kill Do-gi, he is stopped by the chief of police and taken to the correction room on the order of the bishop. The bishop takes away Ha-jun's ring and banishes him from the community after being disappointed that he failed to defeat Do-gi yet again. Meanwhile, Do-gi himself is put in solitary confinement where he has no way to contact the rest of the Rainbow Taxi members as his earpiece has run out of battery. On the other side, Sung-cheol manages to escape the welfare home by tricking the guards as he makes his way back to the Rainbow Taxi headquarters. Go-eun, Kyung-gu, and Jin-yeon are relieved to see that Sung-cheol is okay and are trying to find a way to get in touch with Do-gi. So Go-eun manages to convince the inmate who smuggles items inside the prison to secretly give Do-gi a new earpiece in solitary confinement. Once Do-gi gets his hands on the new earpiece, he manages to make contact with the rest of the team. Do-gi tells them that his plan now is not to escape the prison, as he's sure the prison is at the center of all illegal activities run by the bishop. Together, Do-gi and Go-eun build a list of all the businesses that the bishop runs under different names all around the world. Do-gi decides that a good way to cause trouble for the bishop would be to put a halt to his most important businesses by stopping their cash influx. After that, Kyung-gu and Jin-yeon manage to put a stop to an upcoming auction by stealing the antique pieces, which is the first nail in the coffin of his operation. Meanwhile, Go-eun disguises herself as a customer at one of the illegal foreign exchange offices run by the bishop. There she uses a device to delete all the data on their computers and puts a stop to their international transactions, making it difficult for the businesses to run smoothly. When the bishop is informed about the holdup in the processing of cash for his businesses, he asks to see Do-gi in person. At the same time, Sung-cheol takes himself inside the prison cell to meet Ha-jun. During their interaction, Sung-cheol claimed that he needed to put his life in danger and share some documents for Ha-jun to see. He hands over the file containing the documents to Ha-jun. Unfortunately, after that, Sung-cheol is immediately taken captive by the bishop's men. At the same time, Do-gi is taken to have an interaction with the bishop himself. Seeing how persistent Do-gi is, the bishop predicts Do-gi's death. However, when Do-gi does not back out, the bishop uses the story of Do-gi's mother's death to infuriate him and blows a whistle, causing Do-gi to suffer a panic attack due to his post-traumatic stress. The guards inject Do-gi with a sedative, and he is taken away to be killed. Kyung-gu and Go-eun, who are at a stakeout outside the prison, notice Do-gi being carried in a van, so they start following it. Back at the church, Bishop is preparing more people to stand up for him and run his business. He is going to replace those who are dead and those who are not competent enough to run his empire. Suddenly, his man comes and informs him that a van with other team members of the Revenge Taxi is following Do-gi's vehicle. So the bishop orders him to kill the whole of the Revenge Taxi team at once. So the Revenge crew is taken to an abandoned factory where all 5 are placed in line to be executed. Meanwhile, in his prison cell, Ha-jun opens the documents Sung-cheol handed to him earlier on and learns that he's a missing boy named Kim Dan-woo. After the bishop had him kidnapped as a child, his parents kept looking for him for years on end. Ha-jun sees missing flyers of his parents desperately looking for their son, who was abducted, and is shocked when he sees the photograph of his father. A flashback takes Ha-jun to the night of his initiation into the cult, where a 19-year-old Ha-jun had killed someone upon the bishop's orders. The bishop lied to Ha-jun's father and asked him to wait at the rooftop of a building if he wanted to see his son. After some time, Ha-jun came there and killed his own father without knowing who he was. He just acted upon the bishop's orders. Back in the present day, Ha-jun is angered and confused about being exploited by the bishop and wonders what to make of this information that Sung-cheol has presented to him. Meanwhile, in the abandoned factory, when all the revenge taxi members are bound and about to be killed, to everyone's surprise, the deluxe taxi storms inside the factory with a female driver inside. The woman uses a sniper to shoot and kill the guards who were scheduled to kill our heroes. Sung-cheol introduces the woman as Rainbow Taxi's first driver, who has now settled overseas. Before entering the prison to meet Ha-jun, Sung-cheol sends an SOS to the woman, which leads her to save everyone's life. Later that night, the bishop visits Ha-jun in his prison cell and claims that instead of punishing him, he's willing to give Ha-jun a chance to compensate for his failure in trying to defeat Do-gi. Right then, the chief of police informs the bishop that Do-gi and the group have managed to escape, which further infuriates him. So the bishop takes out his gun and shoots the police chief. After that, Ha-jun pledges to kill Do-gi with his own hands again and makes a call to the taxi driver. On the call, Ha-jun asks Do-gi if he's willing to take Ha-jun on as their client. He claims that he wanted to take his own identity back. For that, he asks Do-gi to come to the prison. Do-gi takes the female taxi driver's taxi and drives towards the prison building. On the rooftop, Ha-jun waits for a final showdown with Do-gi. Despite being beaten up pretty badly over the last few hours, Do-gi manages to tackle Ha-jun and bring him to his knees after the fight of a few minutes. The bishop, who is watching the fight, hoping to see Do-gi being killed at Ha-jun's hands, is pissed when he sees Ha-jun kneeling before Do-gi. He decides to kill Do-gi himself and points a gun at Do-gi's back. But then, surprisingly, Ha-jun spots the bishop and drags him across the roof before eventually jumping off the ledge. He even takes the bullets in his chest from the gun of the bishop. Ha-jun is satisfied by killing the bishop in the same way that the clergyman made him kill his own father. Eventually, Ha-jun dies at the bottom of the building, reminiscing on the memories he made with the members of Rainbow Taxi when he was posing as an employee there. He wonders if life would have been different for him if he had not been abducted by the bishop, but instead been taken in by Sung-cheol. Meanwhile, Jineon and Kyung-gu release a toxic gas inside the prison and the chapel where all the VIPs and the guards are present. Go-eun closes up all the exits of the property to stop anyone from leaving after Do-gi manages to escape the prison facility. The group leaves the facility after closing Ha-jun's case once and for all, with all the VIPs locked in solitary confinement. 1 year passes by, and things are going pretty smoothly for the Rainbow Taxi revenge crew. Go-eun and Do-gi share a comfortable drink on the rooftop of his apartment. A short epilogue takes us to a military base camp, where Do-gi reports himself to a new soldier in the investigation case of the death of a female soldier who has accused her seniors of sexual assault. So now the Rainbow Taxi revenge crew has reached out to the military to ensure justice there.